Welcome, friend. I'm James, your host, and today, we're diving into another captivating episode. Grab a drink, get comfortable, and get ready for a powerful story that's sure to resonate. If something hits home, share your thoughts in the comments. Let's dive in. My stepfather killed my mother, then himself, and now I'm left to pick up the shattered pieces of a life that was ripped away in an instant. Hey, Reddit. I don't know why I'm doing this, or what I'm even expecting to get out of this post, but I guess I just need somewhere to pour out everything that's been festering inside me. Writing it all down feels like the only way I might begin to make sense of it. If you're reading this, I appreciate your time and your patience, because I'm about to unravel the most devastating event of my life. This all happened in Los Angeles, and it's been exactly 23 days since the night that changed everything, July 22nd. The night that tore apart everything I thought I knew, and ripped away the person I loved the most in the world. It was late, well after midnight. I remember the clock reading just past 3 a.m. when the doorbell rang, slicing through the quiet like a knife. I had been in my mom's little office, a cramped room filled with her art supplies, stacks of books, and a lifetime of memories. She'd spent so many late nights working there, surrounded by the clutter that was somehow organized in her own unique way. Her desk was covered in the remnants of her creative process, dried-up paint tubes, brushes soaked in turpentine, half-finished canvases leaning against the wall. It still smelled like her, patchouli and lavender, mixed with the faint, lingering scent of linseed oil and something sweet, like the homemade rosewater she used to spritz on her face. It felt like she was still there, just out of sight, as if she'd walk back into the room at any moment with her usual radiant smile and some funny story to tell. But that feeling vanished the moment I opened the door. Two officers stood there, their expressions solemn, with a kind of grim pity that made my stomach twist. "We need to come inside," they said. There was a heaviness in the air, like the world had suddenly grown dense and hard to breathe. I was still in my pajamas, hair a tangled mess, and I just stared at them, blinking in confusion. It felt like I was moving underwater as I stepped aside to let them in, and I couldn't shake the sense that something was terribly, terribly wrong. The officers spoke in low, measured tones, explaining that my stepfather had taken his own life and that my mother was already gone. There was a sudden ringing in my ears, drowning out their voices. "He killed her," one of them said. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, and for a moment, I thought I might collapse right there in the hallway. It didn't feel real. None of it did. I was standing there, in our little apartment in Hollywood, listening to these strangers tell me that the most important person in my life had been stolen from me, just like that. The next moments were a blur. I remember my knees buckling and gripping the doorframe to steady myself, the officers' voices growing distant, as if they were speaking from the other side of a thick pane of glass. "Are you all right?" one of them asked, but I couldn't answer. My throat felt tight, like I was choking on air, and all I could do was nod numbly. They told me more details I wasn't ready to hear, about where it had happened and how they had found him. But I was barely listening. My mind was spiraling, racing to catch up with the words that had just shattered my reality. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just stood there, frozen, as the weight of it all pressed down on me, and I wondered if I would ever be able to breathe normally again. Since that night, I've been trapped in a relentless fog of rage, disbelief, and grief. It feels like I'm stumbling through a never-ending nightmare, my emotions cycling through waves of intensity that I can't control. I've destroyed so many things, just to feel something, anything. I've thrown dishes against the walls, smashed picture frames, even punched the mirror in the bathroom, leaving a spider web of cracks that seem to mirror the fractures in my soul. Then, there are the other times, when I'm too exhausted to move, let alone cry. I lie on the floor, curled into a tight ball, staring at the ceiling, feeling nothing but a hollow ache that sits like a stone in my chest. I look in the mirror sometimes and don't recognize the person staring back at me, a pale, haggard face with dark circles and vacant eyes. I feel like a ghost of myself, drifting through the world, unable to touch anything or anyone. But there's so much misinformation out there that I need to clear up. The media got their hands on the story almost immediately, and they twisted it into something grotesque, something far removed from the truth. They painted this picture of a loving couple who had been married for decades, a picture-perfect life torn apart by a sudden act of violence. But that wasn't the reality. My mom and stepfather had only been together for 8 years. It wasn't some idyllic, fairy tale romance. It was a relationship that had its share of struggles, like any other. And he wasn't the kind of monster you'd expect in a story like this. He wasn't a raving lunatic, not outwardly. He was charming, attentive, a man who knew how to make people feel at ease. He could be incredibly kind and gentle. He knew how to hide his darkness. That's what makes it so terrifying. He wasn't just a villain in a horror movie. He was a person I loved and trusted. I keep going over the events of that night in my mind, trying to piece together how things could have gone so horribly wrong. My mother had gone to his apartment that evening. He had a place across town, near downtown LA. Even though they were together, they kept separate apartments, and I realize now that was probably a red flag. It was like she was trying to keep a part of herself separate from him, a space where he couldn't follow. She must have known there was something dangerous beneath the surface, even if she didn't want to admit it, even to herself. They spent most weekends at her beach house in Malibu, a place that was practically sacred to her. That house was her masterpiece. She had spent years pouring her time, energy, and money into it, transforming it from a dilapidated cottage into a sanctuary. The walls were lined with her paintings, the shelves were filled with trinkets and books she had collected from around the world, and the garden overflowed with wildflowers, herbs, and succulents she had planted herself. It was the one place where she could truly be free. And now, it's just a place of death. The police said she was killed sometime around 9 p.m., and that he had left his apartment shortly after. He drove up the Pacific Coast Highway as if it was just another evening, like he wasn't leaving behind a scene of horror. The drive takes about an hour and 45 minutes, and it's a beautiful, winding road that hugs the coast. I wonder if he even noticed the view, or if he was too lost in whatever thoughts were swirling in his head. Did he regret it? Did he feel anything at all? Or was he already numb, resigned to what he had decided to do? By the time he reached the beach house, my mom had been dead for almost 2 hours. He didn't rush. He didn't show any signs of panic. He parked the car as though it was any other night, calmly walked up the steps, and even greeted a neighbor who was out walking their dog. It's chilling how normal he seemed. That's the part that haunts me the most, how composed he was after committing such an unspeakable act. The details of what happened are what keep me up at night. The coroner's report said there was only one wound. A single, precise stab to the heart. There were no defensive wounds, no signs that she had fought back. It wasn't the chaotic, frenzied attack I'd initially imagined. It was cold and deliberate, as if he had planned it. There was no passion behind it, only a detached, methodical cruelty. I used to think that maybe it was an argument that got out of control, that he had snapped in a moment of rage. But the more I learn, the more I realize how wrong that was. This wasn't a crime of passion, it was a decision. A conscious, calculated choice to end her life. After arriving at the beach house, he made a phone call. Not to me. He called some mutual acquaintance, a casual friend he sometimes walked his dog with. He didn't confess or apologize, he just spoke in cryptic terms, enough to raise concern but not enough to reveal the full horror of what he'd done. When the police arrived hours later, they found him hanging in the living room. There was something eerily peaceful about the way they described him, like he had already accepted his fate long before they got there. It's as if he had known all along that this was how it was going to end, that he would take her life, and then his own, leaving nothing behind but questions that may never be answered. The media latched onto the story like vultures, eager to pick apart every detail and turn our private tragedy into a public spectacle. They found a way to drag in a minor celebrity who had crossed paths with my stepfather once or twice, spinning the narrative into some kind of sordid Hollywood scandal. For the record, there was no hidden friendship, no secret affair, no double life. It was just another layer of sensationalism added to an already grotesque story, a distraction from the raw, real horror of what actually happened. It felt like the media was stripping away the humanity from my grief, turning my mother's death into just another headline for people to gossip about over coffee or at the gym. I kept seeing my stepfather's name, my mother's name, plastered across tabloids and news sites, paired with lurid phrases like murder-suicide in Malibu and Hollywood tragedy. Each headline felt like another punch to the gut, as if their deaths were just entertainment for the masses. My mom. God, how do I even begin to describe her? She wasn't just my mother, she was everything to me, my best friend, my mentor, my safe haven. She had this magnetic personality that drew people in, you couldn't help but love her. She'd walk into a room, and it was like the air changed, became lighter, filled with her infectious laughter and bright spirit. She was the kind of person who'd talk to a stranger on the street like they'd been friends for years, who could see beauty in the mundane and joy in the simplest moments. Her creativity didn't just stop at art, it was a part of everything she did, whether she was whipping up a spontaneous gourmet meal from leftovers or decorating the house with her own handmade crafts. She was a nurturer by nature, always planting things, growing things, taking in stray animals. Our home was filled with her presence. Every room held something she had made, a piece of her that was alive in the walls and the furniture, the garden outside that she had tended to with so much love. Now, the apartment feels empty. It's like all the life was drained out of it the moment she died, leaving behind only hollow spaces and silence. I spend hours sitting in her room, surrounded by her things, hoping to feel some connection to her, some comfort in her familiar scent that still lingers in the air. Her clothes are still folded in the drawers, her paints and brushes scattered on the desk where she last left them. I haven't had the heart to touch anything. It's as though moving her things would somehow erase the last traces of her, make the reality of her absence permanent. I keep expecting her to walk through the door, to hear her voice call out my name from the kitchen, to wake up from this nightmare and find her there, alive and vibrant, like she always was. But she doesn't come back. I know she never will. The house in Malibu, her sanctuary, now feels like a tomb. I went there a few days after the police released it back to me, thinking I could find some solace in the place that had meant so much to her. I thought being there, surrounded by her art and the ocean she loved, would help me feel close to her again. But instead, I found myself paralyzed by the stillness, the emptiness. The rooms felt different, colder, as though all the warmth and light she had brought into the place had been extinguished. I kept seeing her everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Her favorite chair by the window, the blanket she'd knitted draped over the back, the sketchbook she'd left open on the coffee table, it all looked the same, but it wasn't. It was a haunting reminder that she was gone, and all that remained were the fragments of a life abruptly and violently cut short. At night, I lay awake in the dark, listening to the creaking of the old wooden floors, the rustling of the wind outside, every little sound amplified by the silence. It felt like the house was breathing, like it had absorbed the horror of what had happened within its walls and was now exhaling it back into the air. Every shadow seemed to shift, every whisper of the breeze felt like a voice calling out from the past. I slept with the doors locked, even though I knew he was dead, that there was no one else there. But the fear had taken root deep inside me, and I couldn't shake the sense of dread that clung to me like a second skin. The questions keep piling up, twisting and turning in my mind. Why did he do it? What was he hiding? The police found no evidence of a break-in or any external threats, but they still couldn't locate my mother's laptop or his. Both devices were missing, along with his phone. It was as if he had gone to great lengths to ensure that whatever was on them would never be found. But why? What could have been so damning that it had to be erased, so dark that it pushed him to kill her, to kill himself? The single stab wound, so precise, so deliberate, it wasn't a crime of passion. It was cold, calculated, almost as if it had been rehearsed. I lie awake at night, thinking about what might have been on those laptops. Emails? Financial records? Some kind of secret that was worth killing for? I don't know if I'll ever find out. The pain of losing my mother is overwhelming, but the betrayal stings just as much. I trusted him. I welcomed him into our family, shared my life with him. He was a part of our world, someone I thought cared about us. I can't reconcile the memories of the man I knew with the monster he became. It's like he was wearing a mask the whole time, hiding his true face behind a facade of kindness and charm. I loved him like a father, and now I don't know if any of it was real. Was it all an act? Was there something dark and twisted in him that I just couldn't see? I keep replaying old conversations in my mind, looking for signs, for anything I missed. But there's nothing. He was good at hiding his darkness. There are moments when I can't stop the anger from boiling over. I want to smash everything in the apartment. Tear down the walls, burn it all to the ground just to release the rage that's eating me alive. It feels like a poison running through my veins, turning me into someone I don't recognize. I hate him for what he did. I hate him for taking her from me, for leaving me to deal with this mess, this agony that never seems to end. I think about that night, about the drive up the coast, and I wonder if there was ever a moment when he considered stopping, turning back, choosing a different path. Or was it inevitable? Was he always going to do this, and we just didn't see it coming? I've tried to talk to my mom's friends, the people who knew her best, who might have some insight into the parts of her life she kept hidden from me. But no one seems to know anything more than I do. They're as shocked, as devastated, as lost as I am. It's like we're all stumbling in the dark, trying to piece together a puzzle with missing pieces. Some of them tell me to focus on the good memories, to celebrate her life instead of drowning in the details of her death. But how can I do that when the way she died looms over every memory, every thought? How can I remember her laughter, her joy, when all I can think about is the moment it was silenced? The worst part is the loneliness. The sense that no matter how many people are around, I am alone in this grief, this pain that no one else can fully understand. It's a suffocating isolation that follows me everywhere. I keep seeing her face in my dreams, sometimes smiling, sometimes looking at me with an expression I can't decipher. It's as though she's trying to tell me something, but I can never quite hear her voice. And then I wake up, and she's gone, and I'm alone again. Some nights, I sit on the beach outside the Malibu house, staring at the dark waves crashing against the shore. It's so quiet there, almost serene, but I can't find any peace. I just sit there, feeling the cold sand beneath my fingers, and wonder if she can see me, if she knows how much I'm hurting. I talk to her sometimes, whispering into the night as if she's somewhere close, listening. I tell her how much I miss her, how lost I am without her. I tell her about the things I wish I'd said, the questions I never got to ask. But there's no answer, only the sound of the ocean, indifferent and unchanging. I don't know where to go from here. I don't know how to rebuild a life that feels so utterly broken. I keep thinking that maybe one day, I'll wake up and the fog will have lifted, that I'll be able to remember her without this crushing weight on my chest. But right now, that day feels impossibly far away. I'm trying to keep going, to live as she would have wanted me to, but every step feels like I'm dragging myself through quicksand, getting pulled down deeper and deeper. I'm not sure what I expect from sharing this, but if you've read this far, thank you for listening. Maybe it's enough just to know that someone out there has heard my story, that I'm not entirely alone in this darkness. If you have advice, if you have any words of comfort or wisdom, I would appreciate them more than I can say. I don't know how to move forward, but I know I have to try for her and for myself. It's just so hard to see a path through the pain.